What's up? What's up? Yes. Welcome back. Welcome to another episode of Oliver Voiceover with Kiff VH. I am your host, Kiff VH, and welcome back. I've had to get a root canal this summer, and that slowed me down from producing anything more. But I am back. Yeah, super fun. That's how you like to spend your podcast budget. In the studio with me today is the lovely, the talented Bennett Smith. Bennett, thank you so much for coming in, man.
Thank you for having me.
I
love it how you called me lovely. No one's ever called me lovely before,
Seriously?
But I appreciate that. I feel
in this town.
Yeah.
Really?
No.
Well, you're lovely not only in appearance but also in person.
Wow, you're just laying it on thick here, Kiff. That music must have got you in the mood.
It always does. It always does. It's I don't know. It's great. We've worked together on several sessions on a game that I don't think we can talk about.
I think we can.
We talk about it?
It's coming out in November.
Yes.
Dishonored 2.
Dishonored 2.
Yeah.
Man, it's such a freaking exciting process to be a part of a video game.
Yeah.
I mean, it's what's been your process? How'd you get started?
How did I get into this whole crazy thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of interesting. I come from a writing background, so just when I moved out here, I was really trying to bang on the writing thing, and I worked in a little reality TV, which is completely unfulfilling a lot of the times. But it's a job, and so through that, I got hooked up, kind of friend of a friend with Tim over at Blind Light, and I started doing some writing for them. And then, the writing thing kind of it wasn't as lucrative. It didn't really keep going, and but they do a lot of voice direction and voice production stuff. And so I kind of just got looped into it that way.
How when you say get looped into it, like, I mean, they were like, we have some actors over there. We need someone to tell them what to do. Do you go in and sort of figure it out, or do you?
I kind of started. Yeah, I started as a coordinator. Basically just the person who takes all the notes, make sure that like any sort of line changes and that kind of stuff and circle takes are all just sort of recorded. And so I sat there and I worked for this director Wes Gleason, who I'm sure you've worked with.
Sure, no, Wes, yeah.
This is fantastic.
Yeah,
I learned from him, learned from the best.
Yeah.
And so we actually did Skyrim together. That was like my trial by fire.
Oh wow.
So that was like, it was almost 2 months straight, 5 days a week. Recording. They did the entire game in one fell swoop, which they've never done again.
God.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
I mean, how many lines are you talking?
70,000. something insane like that. I mean, it may have been more. I don't even really know. We definitely went loopy after a while. But off of that, like, I just started like doing a couple little directing jobs here and there, and kind of just eventually started getting handed, full games and that kind of stuff. So yeah.
When you just so, I mean, part of the reason I wanted to have this conversation is, so often as an actor, you walk into a room and there's folks sitting there, and aside from a handshake and a name exchange, it's go. Right. So in terms of process, background, experience, what how you get to those places, it's a mystery to most of us.
Right. Unfortunately, yeah. I mean, you've been in the studio before. It is very much like the clock's ticking. Let's go. You know what I mean? Like we have 400 lines to get through in 4 hours. We got to do it.
Right.
And sometimes we are afforded, and like I always cherish these moments when you're afforded like a moment with the actor to be like, okay, this is like where you're from, and like give you a little backstory, a little motivation. But a lot of times, it is very much like, get in there and do it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And thankfully, a lot of the actors, including yourself, who I've worked with, super easy. They get it. They know how to go in there, and they know how to nail it. And so, I think there are sometimes we get more on-camera actors, and they're used to that different, more not hand-holding, but they just want a little more information, and it's like we don't really have time for that. Not all the time, at least.
There's a super different pace in the on-camera world where you're, in between takes even, where it's just, I mean, you've been around it. It's just things stop, cut, and now we're gonna have 5 to 6 minutes before we reset.
Exactly.
Unless we're losing light.
Right. Yeah, and like some actors, like I think yourself, you do some on-camera stuff.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's good. I think having the wide breadth of sort of understanding on how the process works. But in the other sense, like, even though we are kind of rapid fire doing voice stuff, it is a little more pure because, we can kind of just get in the character and then just flow with it, as opposed to like, all right, we have to stop and like some guy's got to move a light and like someone else we got to find this person, like that can like throw off your game as well. You know what I mean? So.
How did you? I want to back up even further. Where are you from originally?
I'm from the Boston area, a little town called Sudbury, Massachusetts.
Sudbury, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And as a kid, like, did you want to do this kind of stuff, or were you writing actively a lot when you were getting started?
Yeah, no, I came more from directing. when I was little, I was more of a director. When I think I was 12, I directed a movie called Terminator 3, which was essentially Terminator 2, but the final scene was filmed in an outdoor pool instead of a steel smelter. So, yeah, I mean, like, we got a hold of the parents', the VHS video camera, and we, kind of had fun from there. So, yeah, I started with films kind of early. Always loved them. I always loved video games as well.
Yeah. What games did you value program on?
I don't know. I mean, I was more of a computer gamer. I remember Command & Conquer. Like, I played that game a lot. And that game actually had live action bits. I don't know if you've ever played the original.
I never played Command & Conquer.
The original had it was live action, and they did like video sort of cutscenes, which was really revolutionary because this was like early on in the CD-ROM sort of gaming thing. So that was kind of cool. Like, and I kind of got I kind of like the crossover nature of that.
Yeah. Is it like a Dragon's Lair sort of a thing where it's like a movie that you tried to keep going based on your action, or is it more story-based?
No, it was more story-based.
Okay.
It was more like they had the game interface and they would cut out and it would be like, the cinematic information.
I see.
Wing Commander did a couple of versions of that too, maybe Wing Commander 4. But those are a little later. Like, even earlier than that, I mean, we can go way back. There was a game called Spaceship Warlock, which not a lot of people have played. You can look it up on YouTube, and it is hilarious. But it's a point and click, and but they had really strong 8-bit synthesizer music, and they had this thing where you could type in responses, and then I don't know how the engine worked, but based off the responses, you would get a response from the characters. Wow. It felt vaguely interactive.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. There was all kinds of things like that. So, anyways. Did the film thing, went to school, and kind of decided, hey, maybe I can write as a means to get into doing directing. Because Quentin Tarantino, obviously, when I was young, he kind of came up and I was like, oh, he did it. There's all these people who do this stuff. I should try that avenue. Yeah. So that's kind of how I ended up, getting into it. So
that's really great to hear. I mean, I remember, a similar thing. I wanted to figure out how to get in front of a camera, in front of a microphone, and had no clue. And no one in my town was any help at all in that way. Or it's just like, that's for them. It's not for you.
And where are you from originally?
I'm from Grand Rapids, Michigan originally.
Oh, cool.
And the only person to come from Grand Rapids that's not true. There were a lot of people come from Grand Rapids. But the only person who came to this industry and became known, and in that community sort of infamous, was the screenwriter Paul Schrader.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And infamous because of how he broke from the Christian tradition that we all grew up in and wrote Taxi Driver and Hardcore and stuff. But there wasn't a whole lot. There wasn't any path. So it was the same kind of thing of someone's doing it. I don't know how. I'll figure out based on what I see. And for me, it was crewing. I was like, I'll figure out how to wrap cable and hold a boom mic and set flags and do the hard work of figuring that out and get on a set. And learned, oh my God, so much from that.
Yeah, I mean, I did the same thing, except it was what I learned was I don't really want to be here right now. You know what I mean? I was not the typical crew guy. I mean, I do like being on set in terms of directing, but the sort of the logistical issues are I was not super keen on production managing or anything like that. You know what I mean? I just and dude, I respect all those people who do that 1,000%. Don't get me wrong, because I'm just saying my skill set was never really meant for that.
It's funny. It just made me think of something. My daughter and I watched Coraline last night, and to see, we watched some of the supplementals on there, and there were women who who hand knit the costumes in scale for these 9-inch, puppets that they built, and that's their freak. That's their thing that they love. And I was like, I have a nice attention to detail on certain things, but that level of, that's where they fit in the industry.
And and you know what's cool about that studio? It's called Leica. They're up in Portland, Oregon. They're coming out with a new movie. I just saw it. I went to a premiere. It's called Kubo and the Two Strings.
Yeah.
It's super cool, and the coolest thing about that movie, aside from the visuals, which are fantastic, is they actually, for the premiere, they built like a mini museum, and they brought in all the props of stuff that they had built, so you could kind of and I had no idea. I was just like, it looks like stop motion, but I had no idea the attention to detail. They literally do everything on these sets and stuff like that. I mean, it was pretty wild. They also did this cool thing, which I thought was awesome. They made, I don't know if they programmed the camera, but basically to make 3D, they would have the camera move left and right for every shot. So they built in this little program, so it would go, just left and right. So that way they could, when they stitch together, you can get great 3D out of it.
Yeah, so they have native 3D instead of having to either post it or have two cameras there.
Exactly. So yeah, they're not even just doing like small, that's cool artisan stuff, but they're also like doing interesting technological, filmmaking techniques and stuff like that. So yeah, super cool. I recommend checking out the movie. It's really beautiful.
We're anxiously waiting. My daughter is nuts for not only animation, and she's a huge gamer too. Like her thing right now is Undertale. Like this move towards all this. And I resist like the Minecraft and the Undertales and the stuff just because been there, done. I've done track and field with a pencil. I've played Joust. Now I want the immersion of a Dishonored. You know what I mean? I want the level of graphical integrity and the artistry, and for her it's just story.
Yeah. I'm not familiar with that one, but yeah, I mean, the gaming, there is obviously a wide scope, and it's like film, I think there's just a niche for everything. There's a niche for in film, there's a niche for that big blockbuster, and then sometimes you want to watch a smaller independent story, and I think it's the same thing with games, you know what I mean? And but yeah, I'm of the same, obviously, coming from where we come from, where we're trying to craft these stories and stuff like that. I love the story immersion stuff. And speaking of which, I gotta say, BioShock Infinite, your Comstock, kills me, dude. That's
thank you.
A lot of people say that other BioShocks were better. For some reason, I didn't really play them, but I loved Infinite. The story for me was awesome, and Comstock was such a good character. So
thank you so much. Oh man, it was. With the re-release of that game now, I mean, I'm so excited to play it on the Xbox One just to see what the completion of that visual world that Ken and everybody there at Irrational created. And I mean, that the moment, I don't want to spoil anything for people who haven't played it, but that's the first game that brought me to tears playing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, the final 30 minutes of that game are just unreal, and it's such an it was an honor to be a part of that thing.
And was that process different than other games? I know correct me if I'm wrong, but Ken Levine is obviously has a strong creative arm and everything, and so what was that like? Because I'm actually kind of curious. How did you guys get that sort of?
It was really interesting. I know that Elizabeth's motion capture. They had recorded all the audio first with Courtney, and then an actress named Heather Gordon did all the performance capture for for Elizabeth in the volume to Courtney's VO.
Oh, okay.
Which I thought was fascinating. And one of the things that was really neat is that there was a lot of attention brought to how Elizabeth moved. Which was really kind of cool from a performance capture standpoint of oh man, that's awesome that's being recognized, that people love that about that character. For me, I did not know this, but I think, and I haven't talked to Troy or Ken specifically about this, but I think for Comstock, Troy had recorded all of Comstock's stuff.
Oh, really?
And I think my assumption is that it would pooch the reveal of that. So I came in later in the game.
I see.
So they had one of the primary animatic scenes that Comstock had we probably did maybe 6 sessions for me to successfully ADR it.
Wow, really?
So, the animation had been completed. They hadn't done a lighting pass on it yet, so it's still roughish, but for the most part, they weren't changing it. So I had to match lip flap on the character, and Ken Skyped in. So I had 416, a baseball cap with 2 lavs on it, wires down my back, the script, the monitor, and in the small postage stamp Ken, and then another camera on me to capture. They weren't going to use my lip flap, but he wanted to see me in the conversation.
Sure.
Doing the Skype session from Boston, and we did maybe 6 of those, trying to get that one scene.
Wow, that's crazy.
And it was really tough trying to find who is this character,
right?
Because it was well, he could be an obsessed preacher, and we kept coming back around to things. But my final session in maybe November, I just got the feeling like I had let Ken down. I just felt like I didn't get what he wanted out of the character. I don't know what it was, but it was kind of we did one session. I had a voice match job. I had a voice match job that afternoon where I was voice matching another character, and that morning we had done a session where we were kind of fishing for the character a little bit. So he's like, what if because of what Comstock is saying is so cancerous, what if his throat is cancerous?
Right.
So I'm doing this Tom Waits in Dracula screaming, and I had nothing in the tank, and then go to this voice match session for something I'd booked. It was just challenging. But one direction Ken gave me was, what if he's like Harrison Ford in The Mosquito Coast? I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I thought about it, and I didn't hear anything from 6 weeks after that session. I was like, crap, they probably recast me.
Right.
And then Pat Brady calls me, and she's like, so you're on a plane to Boston tomorrow. Ken wants you at Irrational. It's like, I'm going to what? So I flew to Boston on a red eye and went into the whisper room at Irrational, and we did all the audio logs. We did pretty much the entire performance. He was happy with what we did with that particular animatic or the cinematic.
Sure.
And then the rest of it, we were I walked into the room, and he said, do you have anything that you want to say before we dive in? I said, there's one thing that you said in our 2 sessions ago where you mentioned Harrison Ford and Mosquito Coast, and it gives me an idea for this character. I want to try something. And he clapped his hands, and he was like, I can't tell you how happy that makes me that when we get to collaborate on this character, that it's not me telling you how this character is, but it's us finding him together. I want your input.
Right.
And then I did an audio log, and he was like, that's it. And we did the whole thing very quickly.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's so it's funny. It's I come from the writing world. I really enjoy it, but directing, working with actors, finding that collaborative moment is such a sweet thing, especially when it hits a pure note. When you're that's exact. I didn't really expect that, and maybe you didn't either, but somehow we met in the middle, and it's it's perfect. I love that. That's a great feeling for me. So yeah. I mean, I can't be one or the other. Sometimes I have to introduce myself as a writer. Sometimes I'm introducing myself as a director. It just really depends. But yeah,
that's interesting. Why is that? Do you feel?
Because everyone. I mean, it's. I don't know. I think it's one of those things where you meet somebody, and if you say you're an actor, it's kind of okay, boom, easy to sort of compartmentalize. But sometimes if you're meeting somebody else, maybe as I'm a writer, maybe this, there could be down the line, and I'm not this Machiavellian at all, in terms of job opportunities, but maybe down the line, they would prefer to have a writer for something else, you know what I mean? Versus if I say I'm a director and I do a lot of directing in video games, that's kind of a narrow focus. No one's going to be I have a film that I want you to direct because you've directed this video game. I mean, I don't know. I could be wrong, but yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I am the worst at sort of navigating the job hunt search thing. Things just tend to fall in my lap. Occasionally it comes all at once, and occasionally it's more sporadic. But I can't force it, so I just I've been winging it for 30 years. So
man, I agree with you though. I feel the more you force it, you find out, you get like the stuff that I've really fought for or clawed for or whatever. When you get it, you're like, oh, this is what this is.
Right.
Versus the things that you're like, you don't have that expectation for. It's presented to you or emerges, or a friend is like, oh, dude, you'd be perfect in this thing. And your friend was right.
Right.
You are perfect for this thing.
Right.
You know?
Exactly.
It's such a great sort of joyful feeling that you're like, oh, this is what people have been talking about.
Yeah.
You know, it's not my dad got me this job in the cafeteria.
Of course.
It sucks.
Yeah.
You know?
It's I mean, it is sort of happenstance, and you know, if I could give any like recommendations to somebody, because sometimes occasionally people are like, how do I do this? How do I break into this thing? And I'm like, you just give yourself you position yourself for the right opportunity for it to come along. It really is like, it's kind of a little bit of luck and opportunity, and you just kind of like don't lose sight of like what, you know, excites you, and you just do it. You know what I mean? Like, and eventually, if you're passionate and you work hard, it really will sort of like something will happen. You know?
It's funny how that's just the truth of it.
It sounds so stupid, and if I told myself this like 10 years ago, because I've been doing this for about 10 years now, I'd be like, fuck you. go fuck yourself. But unfortunately, like 10 years later, I'm like, yeah, it's kind of what it is.
It's kind of it.
Moved out across the country to LA, and I've been here, and I just kind of like, you know, just kind of happens, you know?
Yeah.
So
you just open to the opportunity and see what happens. And
right.
I remember someone had said, you know, how do I break into voiceover? And it was, I remember my answer has changed over the years, and the older I get, the more I'm like, I don't know, go break into it.
Right.
I don't know. Open the Yellow Pages. That's kind of what all of us did.
Yeah.
You know, at one point or another.
What's your story? How did you do it?
The Yellow Pages. I mean, truthfully, it was I was messing around in my grandpa's office with his recording equipment, and found that I'd always known I had a good ear. I do impressions and voice matching and that kind of stuff. So that was kind of my way in.
Yeah.
With like, you know, I can do Yogi Bear. Hey. You know, so like, so let's see if there's a way to make money doing that.
Right.
And it wasn't about the money; it was just about being able to do it and feeling like a freak and not being able to do it. But that's all internal. Ultimately, I was in Toledo, and the writer on camera talent for the industrials that I was producing. I asked him one day over a couple Salem lights outside in the parking lot, hey, how do you do this thing? He's like, well, you know, I don't know. You got a good voice. Why don't you just, you know, you're producing this, cast yourself. So I cast myself in a training video. And
what was the video for?
It was for how to use the Interactive Learning Center for Owens, Illinois. And I created a character named Stu Holiday. And Stu Holiday...
It's Stu Holiday.
Hi, I'm Stu Holiday. You know, the computer is nothing more than an Allen wrench with a display.
Oh, my God.
And I wrote it and produced... I mean, prior to that, I had just been logging shot sheets. Like, we'd go shoot at an industrial facility, and then I would just write shot sheets for industrials of medium shot bottles going down conveyor belt. Next shot. Extreme close-up of polypro bottles, because now we're talking about polypropylene.
Right.
Just mind-numbing. And then I was like, well, we need a video for... Someone said we need this video, and I wrote and produced it, and that was it. Then I had a reel.
Oh, yeah.
And then the great days were the days we would go to the recording studio.
Right.
And I would direct Bob, and then in the breaks I would go on the microphone and we would write dumb haikus and try to crack each other up and stuff like that.
Sure, yeah.
And then there was one of the guys who came into the studio, worked at a company called Business Voice, still there in Toledo, on hold messaging. And so I started getting paid $25 a script to, thank you for calling the Binkelman Corporation.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then just, you know, I mean, just one brick at a time.
You became the voice of small Midwest cities or whatnot.
That's right. At least the instead of having to talk to a receptionist to do call routing.
Right. Awesome.
It was a blast.
That's cool, man.
Now, how long have you been in Los Angeles? You moved here?
11 years, actually. I was saying 10. So, yeah, 2005. Yeah,
that's great. How is this a necessary? I get this question a lot from folks. Is it necessary? You know, ISDN and IPTIDL and etc. You know.
Well, I'll tell you what. At least I don't know. Like from my standpoint, I would say probably not, because I mean, even though I do interface with actors, it's like it also is about interfacing with the clients. And since sometimes the clients are, calling in, but the talent center is here, so it's, they wouldn't call into me somewhere else, and then we both call into LA. That wouldn't really work.
Yeah.
However, like in terms of acting, I have met an actor who doesn't live in LA, and he flies in from, I believe, Memphis.
Oh, wow.
So, I don't know his story. He's kind of an interesting character anyways. But yeah, I mean, and I asked him once, I was like, really, you live out in Memphis? Like, why? And he's like, oh, my family's out there. And I guess said something snide about LA people or whatever. And I was just like, yeah, whatever. I'm used to it by now.
Right.
We're all the worst. But yeah, I mean, I think you can. I think you're just harder on yourself. Again, like going back to what I was saying earlier, it really is just that opportunity. So it's like, well, if you have a 20% chance here or a 60% chance here or even a 25% chance here, maybe that extra 5% is what's going to make the difference. So, so I do think, like, I mean, with video conferencing and ISDN, we haven't, like, eliminated the need or the desire to be face-to-face in these things. I mean, video game companies still fly their people out to LA to sit in on sessions because it is important. Like, it's different than, like, listening over a phone. You can't, like, you're missing things over a connection, even if it is the highest quality. Yeah. So
I agree. I mean, just from the experience of working with Ken in the room on BioShock, like that was a real difference maker.
Yeah.
And, to be able to have that immediate feedback, the fullness of it, you just hear nuances that you don't hear over a digital connection.
It's also like, it's also like seeing the person, actually. So we've done a couple of like patches into actors, sometimes actors in New York and they don't want to fly out there or they're out of the country, and we've done that. But I've been like advocating, like, why don't we have a camera if they have a camera and like, so we can see each other? It really makes the process surprisingly simpler because they can see me. Sometimes I direct with my hands, and so I do it unknowingly. And so like when they're seeing this, they can play off it. You know what I mean? So I think that's like an important aspect of it as well.
It's one of the things I love about recording with you is that giant window. Is that I do feel that sense of, that we're connected working on this thing, and that sense of collaboration versus when I'm in an ISDN session and I hear a producer and it's just silent and I don't know what's going on, or even if I'm in a recording studio that's more isolated and there's no window at all, but still in the area, it matters. Yeah. It absolutely does matter.
Yeah.
But, well, one question I have for you too is like what is the process like for you? Just again, because it's a mystery to us. We do our auditions and they disappear.
Right.
And then
they go into the ether.
And then 2 months later we hear, hey, you're working such and such at such and such a time.
Sure, yeah.
What's your process from when you receive an audition? How do you process, or are you responsible for that decision? Are you part of a committee, or is it
it's usually like I have. It's actually they kind of divide it up. They do a casting sort of component of this that the directors, I would say probably, at least from where I'm coming from, we're not a part of that thing. We basically get kind of like you. Surprisingly, it's like you kind of get, hey, you're showing up this day, and like this is what the materials are. Go at it. So. There's not a lot of feedback from us in the beginning, which from a writing standpoint drives me crazy because I'm like, hey, I want to have the material and I want to like see if we can't like mold it. You know what I mean? I want that sort of thing. That usually isn't afforded to us. It is sometimes, but not all the time. But I have been coming from the casting side. Basically, what my experience was, you do a bunch of casting, you kind of pick out the top 10. And then you kind of narrow it down to like 3, and then you kind of let the client, and there's other factors involved, sometimes like, hey, we've worked with this actor before, it can be difficult, like just so you know, that note gives in the client, like blah, blah, blah. Or some actors have like specific things, like there's an actress who doesn't like to swear, which is, that's her right. But it's like, hey, if this game has a bunch of F-bombs in it, you probably can't use her. Right. So yeah, there's like, it's usually 2 or 3, and then the client will sort of pick, or they may even give it to kick the option back to us and be like, just take your favorite.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, coming from the casting side though, I can tell you this. There's so many talented people out here, and if I was taking that number 10 again, 7 of the people are going to do it pretty much exactly as you expect it, and to varying degrees. Like, say there's a character and they just kind of like, they read the side and they get the bio on it and they're like, okay, and they do it. And it's like, it can be great. But there's something that's like always missing, and it always seems to sound like the other 6 of them, right? But the other 3 people, one of them will like do something different and crazy. They kind of all will do something a little bit different that you didn't expect, and I think that's always what ends up drawing the people to the actor. But sometimes for the client, from the client standpoint, some characters, they're like, the voice type is perfect. It's gravelly, it's low, he sounds like a thug. That's all we want. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
So I guess it's like, kind of gauge what you're reading. Like, if,
how interesting does this stuff really need to be?
Exactly. Be like, I know, what's my backstory here? I dropped out of college. Like, my mom's in the hospital. Like, you don't need to do that. So I think it's like, from an acting side, I would just gauge, like, what exactly am I reading here? Like, because know that, like, in games specifically, there are tons of archetypes. Usually, you're populating somebody to get killed. So, like, keep that in mind. And, but if there's something, like, look at the side. If there's something a little more interesting there, then make a crazy choice with it. Because, to be honest with you, like, if you just do the safe thing, a bunch of other people do the same thing. So I always sort of say, I'm like, do the wrong choice, in a right way, and that'll probably pique their interest, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because we've been doing, the video game industry is hitting this maturation point where it's like, okay, there's a bunch of different companies doing these big, grand story games, great acting, etc. They're looking internally for something different. So it's just like, you just got to try and give it to them. So I think it's better taking that risk, but so
that's great.
But at least, from my side, from the directing side, it's essentially, we get the scripts, and usually depending on how much time I get it in, sometimes I get it like a little bit beforehand. Sometimes it's like a couple days, and it's really not that much to prepare. But I'll read through them, just try and get a vague sense of it. We talk to the clients; they have usually some artwork or something, and you just try and I try and figure out what they want, and then I try and just, sort of synthesize that a little bit.
That's got to be a challenging process for you of bridging their expectation and the knowledge of what this potential franchise is going to be, and then the decisions you've got to make on the other side, because at the end of the day, you're the guy going yeah or no to those reads,
right.
And they can be as iconic as, any number of the things that you've done, or disposable, like a character who's going to get shot after, hey, what was that? You know what I mean? Get choked out.
And I'm like, he wasn't as fearful as he should have been. It is, and we make them in pretty rapid fire time, and I think at the end of the day, it is a lot of instinct, and it's just like, it's that preparation idea where you prepare yourself to the point where it's like you can kind of react to what you're trying to go for. The thing that I always like, of course, it varies from game to game, and I'm sure you experience this too, like the amount of collaboration you're really able to offer. But like when you're able to really offer that collaboration and kind of like talk to the client and be like, I know what you're going for, but it's like, it's got a little flat, it's a little like, it's just not that interesting. What if we did this and they like it? Then that's always like fun for me but sometimes again, it's like, you're doing thug number 7, you're going to get killed, let's not try and like make a big deal out of it, you know what I mean? Let's just have a little fun, you know what I mean? Like have him die a real nasty death, and then we'll all be happy, Right. So
how does it compare for you between working in the volume and doing motion capture direction versus when you're doing just a straight VO session? Do you have a preference between the two, or? No,
I think they're different. It's apples and oranges to me. I mean, it's sort of similar, obviously, in the directing standpoint, but like when we're doing like live real capture, it is. I like that process, but it is slower, and so it's like as long as you're not pressed 100% for time, it can be extremely rewarding. Even when you are pressed for time, it can be extremely rewarding. I don't know. I consider them two different things. I think there's pros and cons to both of them. You know what I mean? But I don't prefer one over the other, I would say. It depends on what the project is. Some projects, I think it's more like a project to project basis. Some I would prefer more than other ones, but yeah. So
I've only been able to do one, and I had the greatest day of like work in my life up to that point. I'd done Midnight Club 3 Dub Edition for Rockstar.
The racing game?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I was the Detroit boss. So Naveed Kandasari was our director, and when you come into the garage, I'm like, oh, hey, you're the new guy. Yeah, think you're so tough? Well, this is Detroit, Right. But the thing that blew me away was the reference points on the lens of the camera. so that in the video game you were able to have a handheld cinematic. And at that point, I was always wondering, like, how do you figure, again, from my industrial training, where watching my animator animate extruders and blow molders,
right?
Like having a sense of what you can do in Lightwave, to see that used in a cool cinematic way when I had only been seeing it in industrial applications was just really exciting and fun,
No, and motion capture is super cool. I mean, I always like it because it is always that little bit of like technical aspect. You feel like you're like, oh, this is kind of fun technology. And every time I do it, there's something that's changed. You know what I mean? Like, and we've been doing, I mean, really, honestly, a lot of the video game direction is going into the VR space. And there's a variety of different ways that they're recording that. I mean, some of it actually, I've seen like rigs just we've recorded in the studio, and all they're doing is like a kind of like a camera crane over your head and on your face, and they put the dots on, and that's all they're doing. You're not even in this, like, not doing the full motion capture, just facial capture,
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, there's all kinds of like different varieties of things that they're trying, and I mean, yeah, I'm always excited. Like, I just worked on my second VR game. And I mean, I was super stoked about it. Like, I think it's super exciting. Yeah, I mean, like, I was reading Intel's now creating a video game VR division. You know what I mean?
Man.
So like people are jumping into it, and I'm sure like Google and all the big tech giants are already in there. So yeah, I mean, that's definitely a place that, from an acting side, it's like, make sure you're going out for those VR gigs, because that's going to be a thing where they'll be like, oh yeah, you're the VR guy,
What skill set does that require? I mean, is it the same as, kind of the same as everything, I imagine, or is there
sort of? I mean, actually, it's more theater, I think. Like if you're doing full motion capture, it's like it's blocking, it's knowing how to move your body in a right place. On camera stuff it's understanding where the camera is. Really, I think a lot of the time for the actor, it's like, okay, they're close into my face. I don't have to like really kind of overdo it. Like, I'm going to pick up all these little small things. Yeah. Knowing how to react to like where the camera is, and then of course, like we were talking about earlier. Wait 12 minutes, just remember to call back that memory of the thing you did 12 minutes ago to make sure you do it again. So yeah, there's that sort of element to it. But I think with motion capture, it is much more theater. Performance art, knowing how to move your body around, that kind of thing. I think that's probably more to it. I mean, facial capture is kind of, I think it's pretty straightforward. It is your natural face. Don't get Botox, otherwise you'll be out of a job.
Boy,
I can't move my eyebrows at all.
That's right.
Yeah,
man, that's a. I didn't even think about that, but that's absolutely true. You can't sacrifice movement, because you end up sacrificing expression in every form. Right. Yeah. Well beyond what you can do on camera. Yeah. And even it's got to affect your voice. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things too. It's like, get accustomed to it. I mean, it's the same thing. We were talking about earlier, right before we started, was like combat efforts, right? Yeah. Every actor has to do them. I know you guys don't like them, but that's like part of the deal. Right. And it's like, sometimes I get actors who are great actors and they can't jump over a fence or something, and I'm like, guys, like, this is so, you just go at home and practice. Like, practice what it sounds like, record yourself, and then listen to it and be like, does this sound like it's like what I think it's sounding like, or am I just mimicking in the wrong way? You know what I mean?
That's surprising to me, just because it seems intuitive. Like you know what a movement is supposed to sound like, right? Or that's something that folks don't have, or don't make that connection about what they're supposed to do.
Yeah. No, I think it's weird though. I think a lot of the time, I mean, I'm guessing, and this is my speculation, that like people say this actor have never like jumped and pulled themselves up over anything. They're just kind of mimicking what they think it sounds like, as opposed to the physical aspect of it. So it's like, try it, and just sort of like, even with the VR thing, it's like, so you have a script, like, walk around, perform it, you know what I mean? Like, do it in an empty space, do it in your living room, and just get the sense of, like, what that feels like. And I think practice and failing is always the best way to achieve sort of the end goal. I do it every day of my life, you know what I mean? So
yeah, you're right.
So yeah, it's that's just part of the deal,
I agree that like, I find the thing that helps me the most, in particular with like getting off book with stuff, is at least running it in two separate spaces, because the space that you're going to do it in is going to be unfamiliar. Sure. And you need to build that muscle. Yeah. And I just did a play. We're doing two more productions of it tomorrow night and then the following Thursday.
Oh, cool. Where is it?
It's going to be at the Second City. It's called Life Expectancy. We did it for Fringe. It's terrific.
Oh, cool.
It's a great show.
All right.
A director is a guy named Ron West, who I worked with at Second City back in Detroit and in Cleveland, and he's a marvelous Second City main stage alumni director.
Oh, cool.
And it's a really funny and touching show about an older couple, early 40s couple having a baby. You know what I mean? As opposed to the 28-year-old, whatever. But it's great. But, I'm shocked, and I shouldn't be shocked, but, memorizing that script over the summer in preparation for the 5 times we did it at Fringe has so improved my ability to memorize sides for auditions for on-camera stuff.
Right.
Just getting that practice back where it's not something that is, I learned for tonight and for tomorrow morning, and then I can forget it, which is kind of the corporate world where you learn your script for a corporate show and then jettison that Etna copy out as quick as you can because it was a crazy little, sketch about anagrams.
Sure, exactly.
But that skill set is so important to keep, especially if you're accustomed to working with it on a stand. When you make that transition to pulling it off and having to put it into your head, it can throw people off, and then you get obsessed about trying to get the words right and not act it.
Yeah, and that can be like a death spiral too. That of course I've experienced before, and it's not the actor's fault, but yeah, I mean I know exactly what you're talking about. I've seen it happen where it's I'm like, okay, we're gonna go past this line. We're gonna skip this page. We're gonna come back here later when we've calmed down a little bit. We'll do something else for a while. Yeah, so. I totally agree. Yeah.
I mean, how do you from your perspective settle situations like that? I mean, doing like what you said, leaving that moment alone and coming back to it later. And
yeah, that's a lot of what it is. I mean, and sometimes, when I read a script, I'll kind of digest it a little bit and be like, okay. And unfortunately, and I'm sure you've experienced this, the game scripts, they tend to be in non-chronological order. In fact, they might even be 100% backwards. So the beginning of the story is actually at the end of the script. And then it's broken up, it's all shuffled and whatnot. So what I try and do is typically is kind of sort through that and be like, all right, let's try and build some sort of a natural arc into this experience. So we're not doing the most emotionally, we're not doing the end, the Comstock at the very end kind of stuff first. You want to build into it, right?
Right.
You want to find out who this guy is. So I'll try and typically do that, and then if we run into some sort of weird maelstrom, I'll just I already have an idea blueprint. I'm like, okay, we can go back to this stuff. It's minor chatter, that kind of thing. We'll try and come back at it. You know what I mean? So yeah, I mean, and it is. I imagine from your guys' perspective, it's really hard because you're getting thrown a lot of things at it. We're doing rapid fire, and it's hard to keep it, in the right spot. So I'm fully cognizant of that, and always attempting to try and make it easier and everyone comfortable enough that we can kind of get through it,
I have to say, I mean, the sessions that we've done to get together, I really appreciate that about you, and that you're, not only how you order what our running order is for a specific session. I mean, I do video game voiceover. I get that I'm going to leave, that there's going to be vocally stressful stuff. You always are aware of how we're doing. You always take breaks. You rarely ask for 3. It's always 2, especially on the big stuff.
Right.
Because like you say, what difference is it going to make on a 3 if I can't get the rest of my workload?
Exactly.
If you've been burned out. Yeah. But also, that's not what we're trying to accomplish here, is destroy you. We're just trying to get this stuff.
Sure.
Yeah,
and like anything else, it's you pick and choose what is the most important thing. Sometimes people get bogged down with this one line. It's I don't like you, and it's they're not saying it right. A client might be it's just not right, and I'm I don't really especially if it's not, it's just kind of a minor sort of thing. I'm I don't know if spending any more time on this is worth it. Let's focus. It's always about not triaging, because that seems like something's wrong to begin with, but the idea of focusing on the important stuff as opposed to trying to get bogged down in every single thing. So that's my job, is to help interpret that and attempt to make sure that working with the actor, we get the right spots. And if something's not a little smooth on certain places, that's okay too. You know what I mean? Like, that's the other thing to remember is like when we record 500 lines for a character, if one line seems like a little strange or whatever, maybe it just adds to the character. Maybe it's like it's okay to be a little bit outside of the bounds. I think it's funny too. It's like we spent all this time. We're like, I'm like, Kiff, the line was great, but like you had a mouth click in there, so we'll go do it again. And then we do it again, and we get it clean, and then it goes into the game. And then I play the game, and I'm like, always trying to figure out what did I do, what can I improve upon, and the line is so buried in underneath the conversation, like everyone else. It's like, even if there was a mouth click, I couldn't hear it, and it's more natural sometimes if it was like a mouth click, So we always like are trying to. We spend all this time trying to get this pristine thing, but then it's like, well, in the end, they muddy it all up anyways because they want to make it sound more natural. When it sounds 100% clean, it sounds weird.
Yeah.
Room and space and like objects, like they distort your voice. So
yeah, it's not. We're not recording a spot for Audi.
Exactly.
My Detroit Pistons, when they made their playoff run in 2004, Rip Hamilton would always say, "If it ain't rough, it ain't right."
Right.
And I love that notion, and I try to bring that to a lot of, in particular, to character auditions, because I feel like that's where, that's where you can. That's where the truth lies.
Right.
When the character's working stuff out and trying to think about stuff, then there's going to be pauses and unnatural stuff, and sometimes I feel like, especially if it's like like you say 500 lines and we're going through an Excel spreadsheet of knocking out lines, that you fall into that trap of, all right, we're going to say this line very quick, like you become aware of the timeline versus the life of the character, and it's a discipline that you have to discover. And
and I think that separates a lot of the time like the good actors from the bad actors, is that like and to be fair, most of the actors I work, like I would say well over 85% of the actors I work with are extremely talented people, and I'm really glad to work with them. But sometimes you have those other people that aren't as great. They may have an interesting vocal quality, but for some reason they're reading it sounds like they're reading it. You know what I mean? It's like, and I think like what you're describing, this sort of like pauses and imperfections in the thing, and maybe sometimes also throwing away some of the punctuation, because most of these games, whoever's writing them tends to put way too much punctuation in. It's kind of like, from a writing standpoint, we always were told when you're screenwriting, never write the parentheticals, like disappointed. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because then your actor will inevitably read it. Like,
right. And they'll never have another opportunity. Exactly. Or the actor will read disappointed. I got
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's another sort of thing to sort of add to, if you're trying to get in there, like find that sort of niche, like makes them the lines seem more alive and less written. I think when they sound written, the average gamer can pick that out in an instant. You know what I mean? They can hear it and be like, nope, that's not right. So
is there a style that you find in particular in games that if where it's too cinematic or too thrown away, do things need to be, that sort of that, like, the image in my head is David Duchovny in the X-Files.
Right.
Where it's just, I'm barely moving my lips, I'm just talking here. Listen, Scully. You know what I mean? Like, where it still has to be a little, like promo, for example, is a little bit more pronounced. And just a little bit more where you're coming out and finding that sort of, just the correct genre of vocal performance.
Yeah.
Do you feel that in particular games, but from your experience outside of that too, like what is the nature of the type of performance that it should be, or is there? Can it be more throwaway, and is there room for it, or does it need to be elevated a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough question. It's tough for me to answer this, because part of it has to do with scene context, the way the scene is being assembled, which is a thing that, unfortunately, I have no control over. Like, that's the one thing that, I personally, like, I wish I had more, not control, but more input on, like, just like I said in the beginning, before, like, we get the text, and then at the end, the implementation of it. Because in my head, I may see things a certain way. We may do 3 or 4 takes on something, right? One of them is kind of thrown away, and one of them is like real on top of it. You know what I mean? And maybe I'm like, I look at the scene, I'm like, the on top of it is like where I need to be. I need to feel, and the character needs to feel sort of intimidated by you or threatened. You know what I mean? But then when they put it together and they're doing like the actual blocking of the scene in the game, they do it a certain way, and I'm like, oh, you know what would really be dark is if he throws it away more. That's something I can't control, and that unfortunately is up to someone else at the game company. My fingers crossed, like I hope one day to have that sort of input on either sides of the production of it, because then I can feel like, you know what, like, even if I didn't make the right decision, this wasn't the right keeper, we did get something else, and that's going to work there perfectly. You know, and I can totally understand why. So that, I mean, it's hard. I think, like, again, like if you're doing 2 takes on something, you know, make them different. And, you know, we might say, hey, you know what, give me one more like that previous one, but just up the tempo a little bit or whatever. You know what I mean? And that way, I mean, that's the other thing. At the end of the day, it's like if you have the time, let's go for scope. Let's try a bunch of different things. Like, you know, there's probably a spectrum. We get you the characters in a spectrum, and like, let's give me a couple different versions of it, and you know, maybe just like having a couple different options can give us ideas onto how to keep moving forward. You know.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, that's great, man. What's a project that you worked on that you're really freaking proud of, and you wish had got more attention / love? Yeah,
that's a good question. Well, I don't know. All right, here's what I will say.
All right.
The first game I ever directed was a game called The World Gone Sour, and it was a game for Sour Patch Kids. And
what?
Yeah. They did
like an online like website.
No, it was a side scroller action game, and it was maybe it was on mobile. I don't even know.
Yeah.
It was. You ever watch the American version of The Office?
Yeah.
You know Reed. He's the old guy in The Office.
Oh yeah.
He's the old grumbly guy.
Yeah.
So the game was entirely voiced by him. So it was just me and him, and at the end there was a rap. And he like rapped about Sour Patch Kids, and it was like one of the best sessions I've ever had. It was my first session. I think we did it in 2011, and the game went nowhere. And whatever, who cares? It's like about Sour Patch Kids. It's like so stupid. But I had a lot of fun in that session. I remember that being super fun, and just to work with him, he's like a super interesting guy. He was in like this big band in the 70s. And he's just like an interesting character, and so it was just like, it was a good time. But yeah, no one has ever said, "Oh, I've heard of The World Gone Sour." So yeah.
That's so awesome. I think those are the ones, those crazy little things often are the ones you learn the most about yourself in terms of what, you know, I don't know. I love the crazy little things that will never be seen, or the things that end up with, like, you know, 8 views on YouTube.
Sure.
Like, oh man, that's too bad. That thing was awesome. Or I got some, you know, it was an ace I could keep in that experience, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you want to talk about YouTube, it's like, it's complete, I have no idea how to socially market anything. I think it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, and that's something you need to learn how to do, which I'm still like, I have no idea what I'm doing here. And some people are really good at it. I don't quite know how to crack that code.
You mean in terms of yourself, or things that
just
you've
in general?
done?
Yeah, no, both. Yeah. I think it's really interesting. Like, some people are really good at social marketing.
Yeah.
They know how to like tie into things, and they know the hashtags and whatnot. And I'm like, I have no idea. So that's a learning process that I'm attempting to go through now. And I am going through right now, so yeah, it's pretty.
I'm right there with you. I'm trying real hard, but then I feel like I'm trying real hard.
Exactly.
And I don't trust.
And then you're like, everyone knows I'm trying hard. I look ridiculous.
Look how stupid! Oh man, what a ridiculous post. Why did I hashtag that? I started downloading, like, there's this. I did a small co-star role on the Thundermans a couple weeks ago on Nickelodeon.
Oh, cool.
It was a blast, but I was sitting in my trailer on Paramount lot, like, nerding out because I was back on the Paramount lot for the job. And it was on stage. The Thunderman shoots on stage 25, incidentally, which is where Cheers was shot. So to be able to be on that set, and I was out here 20 some odd years ago for college and saw like a taping on that set.
Oh, so that's awesome.
To be able to make a strong Kramer-esque entrance and be like, right. But anyway, I was messing around with this program called Sing It, I think, where it's like a karaoke track, and then you sing it, and it videotapes. Listen to my language, it's so freaking antiquated. And it captures you singing it,
right,
and then shares it with a bunch of 10-year-olds, and a bunch of 10-year-olds liked it, and then you're like, awesome, but now that's out there. me singing Elton John. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Unfortunately, Terminator 3 won't be released anytime soon. I'm pretty sure I have VHS, and if somebody really wanted to like bend me over a little bit, they'd be like, "I'm gonna release Terminator 3."
Did you do any like visual effects in it, or what did you do? How'd you do it?
Yeah, my arm, when my skin was gone, was aluminum foil wrapped around my arm. There was some ketchup blood and stuff like that, which was hilarious because like there was a combat scene. We did a couple scenes. Well, the first scene we just made up. It was like a scientist working on the Terminator, and the Terminator wakes up and kills the scientist. Okay. Then we did the scene which is actually from Terminator 1, where he goes into the gun store and gets the gun from the guy. Remember? Yeah. And he's like, "Give me your bullets" or whatever.
Yeah.
So we did that, but it was more like a extended combat struggle, and it was in someone's driveway outside of their garage, and like there was a skateboard involved or whatever. And it ended up like we filmed him. He got hit and fell down, but he didn't have enough blood on him, so he's like crawling across the thing to try and crawling across the driveway to try and rub blood on his arm. So like yeah, it was pretty rudimentary.
Oh, man.
But you know what's cool is like, in the age of CGI, it's become so easy to kind of do everything.
Yeah.
A year ago, a couple friends of mine, and we're all like, half of us I think are in entertainment. The other half are just do whatever their normal jobs are. They have normal jobs like normal people.
Right.
And anyways, we stayed up at Kernville. I don't know if you've ever been up there. It's like kind of up. You go up to Bakersfield, and then you drive into the mountains at the base of the Sierra Nevadas. It's a really kind of cool little town, little mountain town. There's a river. And I just had this idea where I was like, let's just like go up and shoot. We're up there for a weekend. I was like, let's shoot a horror movie. Just like a really crappy horror movie. And no one's an actor. So I was like, you know what? I'll write little like character bits on a note card, like 2 bullet points, and that's it. Like, that's all we need to do. And then I had like a loose script where it was like, all right, this scene, these 2 people argue about who loves this person more. And we just went up and did it. And the big reason I did this, though, which was kind of like, it was funny because we would do that anyways, I bought like a fire extinguisher and ran the tubing so you could do the blood splurt thing. You fill it up with blood and you pressurize it. It's like a real old school effect. And it was totally awesome. And I remembered, I was like, because at the time, I think I'd been doing a lot of video games, not a lot of on-camera stuff, and I was just kind of like, I miss it, and like that always like brought me back. I was like, yeah, that's super fun when like you get to shoot the blood and like just really get into it, get all dirty.
That's the best, man. That's so awesome. It's the thing. Like my daughter's trying to do a play right now, like organize a play, and trying to get her friends to do it, and they won't. And she's like, I don't know what to do, and I grew up with 4 younger brothers, so I could kind of conscript them to do whatever movie.
You're gonna do this.
You're gonna do this. We're gonna do it, and it'll be awesome. We're all gonna dress like commandos, and then we're gonna shoot some. We have no understanding of what post-traumatic stress disorder is. We're going to make a movie about it.
Right, exactly.
We'll underscore it with The Doors and Sinead O'Connor, and it'll be awesome. And it was, and it was that whole thing of like, I just want to tell stories and have fun with my friends doing it, and that's what it seems like it is and can be.
Yeah.
And and it's one of the things that just gives me joy of being in this business, that the closer. From that perspective, from being in Grand Rapids, looking at it as a kid, being like, oh, it's impossible, it's so far away.
Yeah.
Like, no, it's not. Here it is. And here we are doing it, figuring it out.
Yeah.
Like on the Paramount lot when we were doing Thundermans, I ran into a friend of mine, one of my former students, who's now like writing on a show.
Oh,
and
awesome.
It was great. And she was like, come on, let's go get coffee. And we jumped in their golf cart and drove around. And it suddenly changed from being Paramount Pictures to campus.
Right.
And it was such a revelation, and it kind of like at the same time gave me confidence, and then also just took away all the veneer of it of like, we're just a bunch of folks trying to tell stories. You know?
Yeah. And I think it's important to like not forget that. I mean, we are all struggling in our own little way to like sort of do what we want to do, and it's like, I think I try and remind myself this. I'm like, just remember, at the end of the day, you should try and do something that has no commercial value at all. You can just if you can get a bunch of people together and shoot like a stupid little scene, just do it and be like, screw it, we're having fun. Like, I think that like a lot of people lose that, especially from the creative side for sure, because we all get like, there's those days where you're just like, you didn't get the audition, or you didn't get the job, and I'm just like, I burned out.
Yeah.
But remembering why you did this in the first place, like that's always important for me. So.
Man. Well, listen, this has been such a delight to have you in studio and on the show and be able to talk about process and experience and stuff. What do you have coming out that you can mention and talk about or give a shout out?
So going back to the writing thing, I have my first book coming out.
Oh, wow.
In a month.
Fantastic.
Yep. So it's called God Farm, and that's like PHARM, like the pharmaceutical. So yeah, it's a techno thriller. It's a novel, kind of fast paced. It's kind of like I liked Michael Crichton, so I tried to do that. But I tried to like, I don't know if you ever read Michael Crichton. His character dialogue is like kind of atrocious sometimes. Yeah. So I tried to be better with the dialogue, but it's my first book, so I'm. My own self-critical nature. I'm like, I think it's a good book. I don't think it's great. I think it's good. But anyways, like the story is kind of cool. It's based in real science. It's about this biochemist who creates a drug that genetically changes your belief in God.
Oh, wow.
And when he does that, it turns out that like big pharmaceutical companies and the government have are already simultaneously creating something like this, and they're using it as a weapon. So now they're chasing after him, and he's got to try and figure out what's going on. So yeah, it's kind of a good old-fashioned techno thriller.
Fantastic.
So yeah, it's coming out on September 15th. It'll be on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and I think digitally it'll be Kindle, Nook, and iBook.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Fantastic. And how can people find you in social media and stuff?
So yeah,
to help you bolster your social media experience.
Social media experience at C Bennett Smith, just all one word, 2 N's, 2 T's in Bennett. And if you look up godfarm.com, you can find the book's website, and they have links to all of our social media stuff there. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
Dude, thank you again so much for coming in. It's just been great being able to talk and hang out,
It's been awesome. Yeah, thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you. And thank you for listening, and we'll catch you soon on another episode of All Over Voiceover. Peace. Thank you for joining us on All Over Voiceover with Kiff VH. Please take a moment to review the show and let other folks know what you thought. And if you dug it, please subscribe. Follow the show on Twitter at AllOverVO, and check out our Facebook page at facebook.com/AllOverVO with Kiff VH. That's it for this time. You get what you get, and don't get upset. Claim victory and depart the field.